Well, the talk would be primarily about the project I'm working on. It's called Open Air. As the name may suggest, of course, it's about open access and, let's say, open access to research results in general, research outcomes, whatever it is. Open Air started now 3 years ago, and it's been funded again to become Open Air Plus. This is the project I'm working on now. And it all started with the open access mandate from the European Commission. I'm not sure you've heard of this, but read carefully your contracts if you are awarded money from the Commission, because now most of the projects, at least in certain areas, certain disciplines, include a special clause 39, which supposedly presumes that anything that you produce as an output in terms of scientific results or papers should be open access, should be deposited in an institutional repository or thematic, and be openly accessible. It's a strong recommendation, so you're not doomed to give back your money if you don't do it, but it will become probably mandatory in the Horizon 2020, at least. I'm not sure about if in all disciplines, but certainly in many disciplines. So, Open Air now is in an advanced stage, of course, because it's been continued with respect to Open Air. And here are its main objectives in a nutshell. The first objective, as I just mentioned, is to facilitate discovery of research outcome, which mainly has to do not just with accessibility and findability of what you have, but also accessibility. So open access must be the rule. So we promote open access at the European level, and we advocate open access, and we cooperate with libraries and with the research centers, trying to disseminate this culture, because it's still missing in many countries. Secondly, what we do is to collect material, which is the result of European funding, with the technical infrastructure, so technology. We collect it and we try to interlink it and contextualize it. Interlinking meaning that we try to identify relationships between research outcomes from across disciplines, across countries, and across institutions. For example, finding a link between a paper and the data set it was constructed, or at least from which the assumptions of the paper were constructed. And contextualizing means to add information that is missing, many times missing from the paper. For example, in this specific scenario, the research project which funded the paper, right? This allows us to measure the impact of research initiatives, whatever they are. They could be a funding scheme, a research initiative in the sense of funding, or it could be an activity that is producing research, and you want to measure how good your activity is. So you want to link it to all the research output that was derived by it. This is not an explicit link again. In many cases we have to infer through the technical infrastructure. And of course, this aim Open Air provides both a networking infrastructure, so people, and a technology that that makes this possible. So the human network is quite extensive. It covers all the European countries and beyond. We include Iceland, Turkey, Croatia, Luxembourg, and Switzerland in the last extension of the project. As you can see, these countries are organized in 4 main areas, and we have hierarchical organizations, at the top of which we have the strategic coordination of University of Göttingen. And these people we have 1 coordinator per country, which is there to allow a top-down and bottom-up strategy. So top-down meaning that any decision that is taken at the level of the project or the commission can be looked after and disseminated across the country. And bottom-up meaning that in many countries, for example, where open access has been implemented to some extent, at least we can learn something and bring it back to the project. So it works well. It's based on an existing initiative, which is that of CORE, which is an open repository for sure, And CO, well, it's a worldwide organization, which includes representatives from countries all over the world about repositories, institutional repositories. The technical infrastructure is what I want to tell you about today, and is what I'm working on. I'm the technical coordinator of this part. And it has to do, again, as I mentioned before, with the collection of information from presumably open access data sources, but in many cases this is not the setting. We collect publications, we collect data sets, and we collect context. Context can be projects, for example, author IDs. There are several initiatives out there. And what we do is to identify connections between them in order to serve them to third-party services. We collect from several kinds. We organize them in categories of data sources. We have data sets, so data repositories. We have publications, both institutional and thematic repositories. We call them entity registries, so data sources that are born to populate and maintain authority files. So they survive to provide identity to entities. For example, have you heard of ORCID? ORCID is international, worldwide activity trying to provide an identity to researchers, right? So we are actually collecting the information from them. Open Door is an organization from the UK, it's JISC-based again, from which we can collect information about repositories in Europe and beyond. We have more than 1,000. We have similar things for projects. EC-Corda is the database from the Commission for the project. And we collect this information within our system. CRIS systems, it's not a very well-known area, but CRIS means Current Research Information Systems. They're mainly maintained by countries or by institutions to preserve information about the research life cycle. So from the funding, where it was taken from, who's responsible for the funding, to the generation of outcome. This allows planning and rewarding when it is the case, and giving merit to the researchers. Not many countries have this kind of tools. Sometimes they have them, they don't know they're called CRIS systems. Of course, to do this, we produce guidelines. So we are trying to explain practitioners in these 4 areas how they're supposed to give us the data. We try to do this with them, of course, so we don't impose anything. But we try to come up with reasonable guidelines, which, if followed across Europe, may really benefit in the way the data is shared and exchanged. And this has been the case for publication, and it worked very well with the driver guidelines. It's the previous project. The majority of repositories in Europe now have implemented these guidelines, and we are moving in the direction of data set entities and CRIS systems. They're already out there, so you can download the guidelines. Where the guidelines are not applied, of course, we harmonize. So we do the transformations. We have the workflows to transform the data. We validate the data sources based on the guidelines automatically, of course, and we give them marks, if they're good or not, if they're acceptable. We cleanse and transform the data, meaning that whatever we collect needs to be harmonized, for example, just in terms of vocabularies, but also in terms of data models. People implement their universe according to their thinking, while for us, publications and data sets have a very specific form. Another thing that we do, and it's important, is inference by data mining. So we are not only stuck to the information that we collect, but we also infer information from this. So we apply mining to PDFs, for example, in order to identify links to data sets or projects and so on. And we build these links. And finally, we do the duplication. That's clearly a scenario where you need it, because most of the time, at least for publications, it's common to collect the same information from several sources. This is less the case for data sets, because data sets have a very community-specific nature, and there are very few who are willing to share it. So it's very rare to find duplicates in that sense. Not of metadata, but. Finally, we of course provide whatever we construct in terms of information space, so objects, connections between objects, with a number of services to the world. Everything we do is open access, so you can go and access it. We have also a way to ask feedback, so to ask registered users to tell us if what we're doing is right or not, and possibly fix it. And we also provide the position tools. And this is done with Zenodo. It's a repository, it's already active, where researchers who are homeless, let's say, so they don't have a repository of reference or a data set, a data repository of reference, can come and deposit. So they provide the data, and it's kept by CERN, so it ensures preservation for years to come. The open layer data flow, again in a nutshell, so what we do is to collect information from data sources, but also from authors, or whoever on behalf of them. End-user claims are basically statements on the reality. So these two objects are connected, and I believe this is the case. And I'm a registered user, and I can tell it. Of course, we validate this information. Thanks to these two main inputs, we build what we call a native information space. We deduplicate this information, and we build a public information space that is ready to be accessible via portals, via APIs, and so on. Here we do other actions which are system inference and human data curation. Human data curation is, again, when authors come, look at our results, and make some statements of quality. They can correct things in principle. And system inference is, in fact, as I mentioned before, so the addition of content out of the content that we collected. We build an enriched information space which becomes public after the duplication. And this is a life cycle that goes on forever. Here is the core of the data model. Just to give you an idea, we have information about what we call results, which can be data sets or publications. We have data sources, which can be of the four kinds mentioned before, aggregators, data systems. We have organizations and projects. And all these are connected, one to each other, with the relationship that you can see in blue. These are, I don't know if you're data model oriented, but this is a very high level description of the model, which is inspired by Serif and DataSite. DataSite is, have you heard of it, I guess? Anyway, it's an initiative that was born to provide data sets with the TOI mainly, but also came up with a metadata description level, which is broad enough to enable citation of the data, not reuse. Okay, so mainly citation. So the model is inspired by citation and Serif. Serif is a data model that was defined by the community of CRIS systems. And these are the kind of things that we need. Standard to share information about research outcomes and project link. Right? So what they did in Serif is to come up with a very general model where project organization is the high-level relationship, but you can plug in the meaning, the semantics of the relationship. So we can model anything. We can basically say that organization is the coordinator of a project, or that it's just a participant of a project, or that it plays another role. Just enriching the vocabulary of the semantics of a specific organization. That's very short, but this is inherited from Serif. So what we do is to collect basically information out of data sources, and we do it in several ways. I won't spend too much words on this, but we collect XML files. In some cases, we collect HTML responses when the data source is just a website. And whatever we collect somehow is the representation of a very complex database, right? So it's a non-the-wire representation. So XML can include information, for example, in the case of repositories, when you collect public core, you collect information about the publication, the authors, the project, the licenses, access rights, and repository. This is all in an XML file, which we take, clean, in order to harmonize it to our way of thinking, and split it in different entities in our database. to build the graph, because we need a graph if we want to have statistics, if we want to provide feedbacks on the quality, for example, or the behavior of an organization, how many publications they've written in 2013, and so on. So we build this graph of information by collecting beans of information from several sites. Here I went in detail on the kind of information that we collect from the different data source typologies, but it's not necessary to get to that level. The same for entity registries. This is the list of those we are referring to at the moment. We have read3data.org. Have you heard of it? It's a directory of data archives. Okay, so it's really useful. You can find information on what kind of content we have, their APIs, and so on. We use it in order to collect information and data from them. Wellcome Trust is the funding firm. Is the funder, an agency from the UK, and EC Corda is the DB from the Commission. So at the moment we only have these two sets of projects. So it's European Commission project and Wellcome Trust. Importing from end users. Beyond the data sources, we have the open air is an order deposition. As I mentioned before, it's a normal, not normal because you can deposit both publications and datasets, but it's a repository. We have cross-reference claiming, which is interesting. So if you are an author, you can come to our system, specify the UI, specify the project which funded this paper, and press the button. And your paper will appear in our system. And then we have human data curation. Again, as I mentioned before, you can visit our site and decide something is wrong and alert us. Here I'm repeating myself, but there is a link. So if you're interested, you can just go there and deposit your data, which is all your publications. It's actually a very nice interface. Information space. At the moment, we have about 400 repositories. They will grow. They will go to 1,000. The total of documents is about 8 million. And data set repositories we are now investigating. So we are experimenting with these three mainly. DataSite Drive and Pangea. Others are in the queue. But experimentations with data sets went beyond experimentations because they are already available. But it's to come. At the moment we have one running production system that you can access today, which contains only 40,000 publications. This is because there's the open air system, so the first one realized, and the target there was different. So in open air, the Commission wanted us to collect information about FP7 funded papers. So these are the ones that we could find. And we have to go out there, test the PDF, ask for permission, mine the PDF, and build the link between the two. We of course try to convince repositories to include project information since the beginning, but sometimes this information is simply missing. So the repository became open air compliant, so, meaning that they can in principle send us this information, but they don't have it physically because the researchers for legacy data never provided this information. So we have mining services on demand, so you can come, send us your PDF, and get back the project linked to your data. But then you still need somebody to write the script and enrich your DB. So this is taking longer. So we actually prefer to take the PDFs and do the work on our side. And in the phase 2, the number of documents has increased a lot. The new release will be released now in September. That's why we will discuss. And the new release will go up to the 8 million that I just mentioned. Another interesting thing is the duplication. The duplication of content. It's a very interesting topic for the scientists. I'm not going to mention it unless somebody wants to know, but these are the kind of relationships that we have at the moment. but we have a framework that is extendable and open to others. So if you want to come and experiment your algorithms to infer information from our data, you're welcome. We now infer project applications, data sets to publications via DOI connections, publications, which is calculated by citation through the bibliography, and other publication by text similarity. So we are suggesting the possibility that a paper has to do with another one in terms of meaning. Finally, of course, having the PDF, we can also fix the metadata and try to adjust it. Identifying the real title of papers or the author of papers, metadata is by definition ill, severely ill. This is the way we exploit relationships. As I mentioned before, we have a very homemade definition of research initiative. It's an activity that is funding, favoring, developing science in any way. For example, the EGI infrastructure is one of our communities now. They would like to know how valuable their work was in terms of scientific results. So they asked us to use our inference tools and claiming tools to engage their community in identifying these things. So they can go back to the commission and say, hey, the researchers came up with this number of papers in these years thanks to the existence of EGI, right? The other example is that of the commission. The commission wanted to know how many open access publications were published under projects which were under the clause 39. So how many of these projects actually accepted the recommendations and how good the open access mandate was applied. What we came up is a system that is configurable. So if you are a new community, you just come in and we use our services to do the same thing for your community. We also work with iMarine. It's a quite large infrastructure based on Science, which is the virtual research environment infrastructure there. And we are also planning to do the same thing with them. Enabling technology, I really have to mention this. DNet is the software that we use in OpenAir. It's broadly used in several European projects. In some of them we are not partners at all, but it's also used by national initiatives to build their own repository infrastructures. In Spain is the example. We're working with Argentina now. They have this event in November where I hope I will be able to go. And others are asking. Poland has already implemented one, but that's not fair. It's one of the partners of our project. Not really worth mentioning. And Invenio is the technology behind Zenodo. It's developed by CERN and is running several instantiations worldwide. This is just the subset of services of DNet that we are using in OpenAir. Everything is open access, open source. Sorry. So we are really eager to share it and have other organizations to use it. Last slide. This is OpenAir, and it's about sharing research results in a very broad sense. But most of the efforts are made on disseminating open access with respect to publications. So there is really no investigation, in-depth investigation in terms of data. We know about the licenses, we have studies about the licenses, but trying to understand what could be the motivations and the benefits of sharing data across different communities in order to achieve multidisciplinary results, in order to improve sometimes also within the same community the results of the researchers is out of the scope of this project. And the Commission is now developing a data pilot, which is going in the same direction. So following the example of OpenAir, broad European community, which includes representatives from the main data centers, possibly, trying to understand which could be the common objectives, how they could work together to improve and actually gain benefit out of their output. So these are the three main objectives, which are quite obvious, I think, but it's good to read them. And these are the recommendations that came up on request from the Commission, from OpenAI, Libre, and Core. Core is the repository organizations that I mentioned before. Libre is the European Association of Libraries. I just explained. What we find interesting, and I mentioned it before at the table, is the fourth one, is to continue to support the creation and interoperability of the infrastructures, which means basically in one statement that the diversity is important, that heterogeneity up to a certain level is necessary for science to go on. So vertical, so-called vertical e-infrastructure should exist, money should be invested there, possibly in economy of scale and sustainability models, and they should focus on different levels of interoperability with other infrastructures in order to enable multidisciplinary science where this is possible, or citation mechanisms of data at the very top level, where there is really nothing to share but the fact that it's data, right, and not publication. You could talk forever about this, these recommendations. The other one is to encourage libraries to push and be part of the research data lifecycle, meaning that the same curation process that normally occurs publications and documentations should take place at the level of data in terms of citations or curation, authorships, for example, all these kind of definitions. Finally, providing the Commission with the necessary feedback to make choices for the future. But that's, since they asked us, we have to say that. Okay, and that's it.